The question that we want to look at today is, what is the Islamic view of violence and terror? People, due to their ignorance and due to what is shown in the media, have this stereotypical image of Islam as a religion that promotes violence and that promotes terrorism. And unfortunately, when it is Muslims who commit such acts of violence and terror, it is Islam as a religion that is blamed for this. And this is very strange indeed. There are certain people or certain groups who justify their actions on a religious basis, yet that is seen, or those are seen as isolated incidents, and a whole religion is not put on trial. One example of this is Christianity. In America, there are extremist Christians who have firebombed abortion clinics. Do they represent Christianity, or do they represent the teachings of Christianity? Of course not. Everybody knows this. Or how about groups such as the KKK, who justify what they do through the Bible and through their Christian belief? Are they representative of true Christian teachings? I think everyone would agree that they're not. Believe it or not, Hitler himself was a Christian and justified the things that he did through his Christian belief. Right? And he was not an atheist. And you can read his autobiography, Mein Kampf, and you can read and listen to the speeches that he gave that confirm this. But we would all agree that he does not represent Christianity. Right? So it's important for us as human beings to differentiate between the teachings of a particular religion and the practices of those who follow it or those who claim to follow it. Now, when we do this for Islam, you will find that terrorism cannot be justified under any valid interpretation of the Islamic faith. And if you read the Quran, the holy book of Muslims, and you study the life of the Prophet Muhammad, God's final messenger, may peace and blessings be upon him, you will see that this is the case. And what I want to do now is just take a look at a few verses from the Quran so we can hear what Islam's holy book has to say on this subject. In chapter 5, verse 32, it says, "If anyone slays a person, unless it be for murder or for spreading mischief in the land, it would be as if he slew all people. And if anyone saves a life, it would be as if he saved the life of all people." So really in this verse, we can see the emphasis on the sanctity of life, right? Now when it comes to conflict in Islam, a Muslim has permission to defend himself or herself against aggression. But the Quran repeatedly urges self-restraint and patience. The Quran states in chapter 16, verses 127 and 128, that if you show patience, then that is indeed the best course. Be patient, for your patience is from God. And if you do not grieve over them or distress yourself over their plots. For God is with those who restrain themselves and those who do good. Also in chapter 41, verse 34, goodness and evil are not equal. Repel evil with that that is better. Right? And no one will be granted goodness except those who exercise patience and those who exercise self-restraint. Right? So we can see in these verses the call for goodness, the call for self-restraint, and the call for patience. Right? And if there is some type of conflict, the Quran states that if your enemy inclines toward peace, then you also incline toward peace. Right? In chapter 8, verse 61, it says, if the enemy inclines towards peace, also incline toward peace. Right? And trust in God, for He hears and knows all things. So, as I mentioned, even if the Muslims or to be in some type of conflict, there are rules that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, has put forth for those circumstances. For example, he forbade taking up arms against women and children, against the injured, against the elderly, right? Devastation of livestock and fields, and other similar acts of brutality and violence. So really, some of these things that we see in the media, killing of civilians, right, beheadings, so on and so forth, cannot be justified in the Islamic belief. Now, there are some verses of the Quran that for somebody who reads them and takes them out of context, they would think that the Quran is promoting violence or promoting terrorism. And I just want to look at one example and show how dangerous it can be when you isolate a verse, take it out of scriptural, and you take it out of historical context. The Quran states in chapter 2, verse 191, and I'm taking the verse out of context, "Slay them wherever you find them." Now, for someone reading just this verse, he would think, what exactly is this verse talking about? Now I want to read to you the verse beforehand and put this in scriptural context. The Quran states, "Fight in the cause of God those who fight you," right? "But do not transgress limits, for God does not love transgressors, and slay them wherever you find them." So the verse is qualified and limited in scope and does not give permission to kill anyone, anywhere, at any time, as some may think the Islamic faith promotes. So these verses are giving permission to defend yourself against aggression, right? And even then, as I mentioned, you must show self-restraint, show patience, right? Incline toward peace, and so on and so forth. So briefly, to summarize what we talked about, the religion of Islam is a religion that promotes goodness, that promotes peace, that promotes the exercise of self-restraint and patience. And the Quran contains many examples of this. And when reading the verses in the Quran, it's important to put them in their scriptural and historical context so as to understand them properly. And even in these cases of conflicts, there are certain limits and rules that we have as part of the religion, right? So, as I mentioned, you can defend yourself against aggression, but that does not mean indiscriminate killing, right? And it definitely does not mean terrorism. So events such as 9/11 cannot be justified and is not tolerated in the Islamic faith. In conclusion, I urge the viewer to verify what I have said and to do their own research with regards to this topic, because this is a topic that is routinely misunderstood about Islam and about Muslims. I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Frequently Asked Questions about the Islamic faith. Please join me next time when I address other questions that are consistently asked about Islam and give an answer with respect to it. Thank you and goodbye.